When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the world thought the war beneath the waves had ended. But it hadn't. Because out there, scattered across the cold Atlantic, were more than 150 German U-boats, deadly machines, silent hunters, still roaming, still armed, still commanded by men who didn't yet know the war was over. Some believed the surrender was a lie. Others refused to believe at all. And a few decided they would never surrender. One of those men was Captain Heinz Schaefer, commander of U-77, a sleek Type 7C submarine that would soon embark on one of the most mysterious journeys of the post-war world. Schaefer's orders had died with the Reich. Berlin was rubble. Hitler was gone. And yet, under the cold waters of the North Sea, his crew waited for a command that would never come. It was May 10, 1945, just 2 days after Germany's unconditional surrender. Schaefer's radio crackled with static, then silence. No orders, no command, just the void. So he made his own decision, a decision that would turn his U-boat into a ghost ship, a vessel that seemed to vanish off the face of the earth for more than 3 months. This is the untold story of what happened to the German U-boats after World War II, and the strange fate of the men who refused to come home. Before we dive deeper into this incredible true story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the untold human stories of World War II. The war was over, but under the sea, it wasn't peace that came first. It was confusion, fear, and the sound of propellers still turning in the dark. Deep beneath the North Sea, Captain Heinz Schaefer stood among his crew inside U-977. 46 men were packed into a narrow steel tube that smelled of oil and seawater. The red lights cast long shadows across their faces, faces that hadn't seen daylight in weeks. Most of them were young, barely out of school. Some had fought through the brutal Atlantic campaigns. Others had never fired a torpedo. They were exhausted, confused, and waiting for one man's decision. Schaefer spoke quietly but firmly. The war may be over, but our honor is not. The news of Germany's surrender had reached them 2 days earlier, but many refused to believe it. Nazi officers had told them surrender meant death, execution, or exile to Siberia. Now their world was silent, and their leader was asking them to choose. Those who wish to go home may do so now. Those who stay will follow me south. 7 men chose to leave. They climbed out into the cold morning mist, vanishing toward a homeland already in ruins. The rest, 40 men, stayed. Then Schaefer revealed his plan. He would take U-977 to Argentina, almost 8,000 miles away, across a world still crawling with Allied ships. The crew stared at him in disbelief. Argentina was half a world away. Their supplies were thin. Their fuel was limited. But Schaefer insisted. There is nothing left for us in Germany. Our only choice is forward. The U-boat slipped beneath the waves and began its long, secret voyage south. They would travel submerged by day and surface only at night, moving like ghosts under the Atlantic. Life aboard became a quiet struggle. The air grew thick and foul. Food was rationed to the smallest portions: biscuits, dried meat, a little coffee. The men barely spoke. Some wrote in small notebooks, counting the days. Others simply stared into the dark steel walls, listening to the endless hum of machinery. One sailor later wrote, "We no longer knew what day it was, only that the sea had swallowed our world." Outside, Allied destroyers still prowled. The war was over, but the hunters hadn't stopped. British and American patrols searched for the U-boats that refused to surrender, the ghost wolves, as the newspapers began to call them. Then came rumors. One U-boat, U-530, had reportedly reached Argentina weeks after the war's end. Allied intelligence whispered that another, U-977, was on its way, maybe even carrying Nazi officers, stolen gold, or something darker. Schaefer said nothing. He kept his eyes on the compass and his hands on the periscope. Whatever his true reasons were, loyalty, pride, or fear, he was leading his men farther from home than any German submarine had ever gone. For 66 days they saw no land, no ship, no sign of the living world, only the endless gray of the sea and the weight of what they'd left behind. The Atlantic stretched endlessly before them. Days blended into nights, and nights into silence. The men no longer marked time by dates, only by the rhythm of diving and surfacing, diving and surfacing. They had been underwater for more than 2 months. Some whispered they'd never see land again. Others began to lose faith in their captain. But Schaefer never wavered. He told them Argentina would take them in, that they would find freedom there, that this journey, though long and impossible, would give meaning to their survival. Still, tension grew. Inside the submarine's narrow steel walls, the air was stale, the temperature rising. Men argued over rations, over faith, over whether they were heroes or fugitives. One night, as they surfaced to recharge the batteries, a watchman shouted, "Ship on the horizon!" The men froze. Schaefer raced to the periscope. A British destroyer silhouette loomed in the distance, cutting through the dark waves. One wrong move, and U-977 would be gone. 46 souls lost to the depths. Schaefer ordered a crash dive. The submarine plunged beneath the surface. Depth gauges spun. The hull creaked as pressure mounted. They waited in absolute darkness, hearts pounding. For hours they listened, distant sonar names echoing through the metal hull, getting closer, then fading away. When silence finally returned, the men knew they had narrowly escaped death. After that night, they changed course, moving farther west, deeper into the open ocean. But the world above had not forgotten them. Allied intelligence had launched a manhunt across the South Atlantic. Planes scoured the waves. Newspapers spread stories that Hitler himself might be aboard a fleeing U-boat bound for South America. For weeks, U-977 remained invisible. Then, on August 18, 1945, more than 3 months after the German surrender, Schaefer finally saw what he had been chasing: land. The faint outline of the Argentine coast rose on the horizon. They surfaced slowly. The crew stared in silence. After 71 days submerged, the sun hit their faces for the first time. Some cried, others laughed. A few simply closed their eyes and whispered prayers. Schaefer turned to his men. "We have reached the end, but not freedom." He knew what waited for them: rumors, interrogation, disbelief. Yet he ordered the boat toward the port of Mar del Plata. At dawn on August 18, 1945, U-977 surfaced near the Argentine coast and sent a radio signal. German submarine U-977 surrendering. The war was long over, but when Argentine sailors
When the boarding party left, they stared in shock. The crew was thin, pale, and silent. They looked less like soldiers and more like survivors of another world. Within hours, Allied intelligence officers flew in. They were convinced this was the submarine that had carried Adolf Hitler to safety. Schaefer and his men were arrested and interrogated for weeks. Every question circled the same accusation. Did you bring Hitler to Argentina? Schaefer denied it again and again. We carried no one but ourselves, he said. No gold, no passengers, no Führer. Yet the myth refused to die. Newspapers across the world printed headlines. Nazi submarine arrives in Argentina. Hitler escapes. U-977 had crossed an ocean, survived alone beneath the sea, only to become part of one of the greatest conspiracies of the 20th century. The arrival of U-977 sent shockwaves across the world. Newspapers in London, Washington, and Buenos Aires exploded with headlines. To many, it seemed impossible that a German submarine could appear months after the war's end, unless it carried something or someone extraordinary. The rumors took on a life of their own. Some said U-977 had landed in secret coves to drop off Nazi officials before surrendering. Others swore it had been seen unloading mysterious crates on the Patagonian coast. For weeks, speculation grew wilder by the day. But the truth was far less glamorous and far more human. Schaefer and his exhausted crew were taken to Buenos Aires and then handed over to American and British intelligence. They were interrogated relentlessly. Every officer wanted to know, why did you keep sailing? Why didn't you surrender when the war ended? Schaefer's answer never changed. We didn't believe the war was over, and when we did, we were too far gone to turn back. For the Allies, it was an embarrassment, proof that the war's final order, the surrender of all U-boats, had not been obeyed completely. Some commanders feared other submarines might still be at sea, carrying fugitives, weapons, or worse. They were right, at least in part. A few other German submarines, including U-530, had indeed reached Argentina earlier that year. Some were scuttled by their captains to avoid capture. Dozens more were surrendered to the Allies across the Atlantic. And more than 100 were sunk deliberately in Operation Deadlight, a massive Allied mission to dispose of Nazi U-boats once and for all. One by one, the steel beasts that had terrorized the oceans were towed out into the open sea and blown apart. Their black hulls sank into the depths like ghosts returning to the dark. The age of the U-boat was over. And as for Schaefer, after months of interrogation, he was sent to a prison camp in the United States and later transferred to Germany. There he was eventually released. He would spend the rest of his life defending his decision, insisting that U-977's journey was not an escape for Nazis, but a desperate voyage of men who refused to believe their world had ended. He later wrote a book, U-977, The Truth About the Journey, trying to silence the rumors once and for all. But the legend had already taken on its own life. To many, the image of a lone submarine crossing the world's oceans after the fall of the Reich became a haunting symbol of defiance, of denial, and of the ghosts of a war that refused to die. In the years that followed, U-977 became more than a submarine. It became a myth, a story that drifted between history and legend. For some, it symbolized the last breath of Nazi Germany, a desperate attempt to keep the illusion of the Reich alive even after it was gone. For others, it was simply the story of men lost at sea, loyal to a flag that no longer existed, obeying orders that no one was left to give. When Captain Heinz Schäfer spoke of his journey years later, his voice carried the tone of a man who had seen too much. He said, "We were not heroes, we were not traitors, we were just sailors, trying to find a way to live when the world we knew had died." It was a quiet truth, one that history almost drowned beneath rumors and fear. Many of the U-boats never resurfaced. Some were destroyed, some surrendered, and others vanished into the cold Atlantic, their crews entombed in silence, still somewhere beneath the waves. To this day, divers occasionally discover their rusting hulls lying like iron tombstones on the ocean floor. Each wreck tells its own story of young men who fought, believed, and ultimately disappeared into the dark. By the end of 1945, the once mighty German U-boat fleet, more than 1,000 submarines, was gone. Most had been surrendered or scuttled. The Atlantic, once filled with fear of the gray wolves, became calm again. But the memory lingered. In the nightmares of Allied sailors, in the guilt of German veterans, and in the imagination of the world, where the line between fact and legend blurred forever. Even today, some still whisper that a few U-boats escaped, that somewhere off the Argentine coast wrecks remain hidden under the sands, guarding secrets the sea has never revealed. Whether those stories are true or not no longer matters. What remains is the symbol, the haunting image of a steel vessel cutting through the depths, carrying men who could not accept that their war was over. They were the last ghosts of Hitler's navy, the last breath of a lost empire. And when the waves finally closed over them, the world moved on, but the ocean remembered.
If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment on this channel. More untold human stories of World War II await you. Stories of courage, loss, and the fragile line between duty and survival.